She married me for my $200, $0 inheritance, then convinced my sister to forge my will. Now she's claiming half our house in a legal battle over $500, $0. I never saw this betrayal coming. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. You won't believe how quickly everything fell apart. One day I thought I had the perfect life, married to Lisa, a beautiful woman I loved, with a nice house, a decent job, and what I thought was a future we built together. The next I was staring at proof that she'd been cheating on me for months. Honestly, the whole thing felt like a bad movie, but it was my real life and the betrayal cut deep. I never saw it coming, not in a million years. Things started feeling off about 6 months ago. Lisa, my wife, had always been a bit high maintenance, but lately she became even more distant. She'd leave the house early, come back late, and her phone was glued to her hand. She'd get defensive if I asked about her whereabouts or who she was texting. Small things at first: missed dinners, excuses about work, late nights with friends. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed or busy, but deep down I had this gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Then came the night I found out for sure. I was supposed to meet her for dinner after work, but she canceled unexpectedly. No big deal, I thought. I decided to check her phone. I usually wouldn't do that, but I had this gut feeling I couldn't shake. I grabbed her phone from the nightstand while she was in the shower. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were messages, flirty, intimate messages between her and a guy named Mark. She was talking about meeting up, exchanging nude photos, and even talking about how good sex was the last time they were together. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me with some guy who, from the tone of the texts, was clearly her secret lover. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what I had just read. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? Had she been lying to me about everything? I felt sick, betrayed, furious. I wanted to confront her right then, but I knew I needed to think carefully. I had to gather my thoughts, figure out what to do next. I kept her phone in my hand, trembling, feeling like my entire world was crashing down around me. The next day, I decided I had to talk to her. I called her at work, and when she finally answered, I didn't hold back. I told her I knew everything. Her face went pale. She tried to deny it, of course. Said it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything, and that I was overreacting. Typical, she lied, but I had the proof right there. Those messages didn't lie. Her excuses about how it was just sex, or that Mark was just a friend, or that she was bored and needed excitement, none of it convinced me. I was hurt, but I was also angry. How could she do this to me? After everything we built, I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything. In my head, the betrayal was so raw, so unexpected, it felt like a punch in the gut. I thought about the money, too, how she always acted like she cared about our future, but she was out there sneaking around. I started thinking about everything I'd worked for, the house, my inheritance, all the plans I had for us. I was furious at her, but also scared. What would happen next? How could I trust her again? Could I even stay married to someone who lied so blatantly? That's when I realized I had to get serious. I couldn't keep living in this illusion. I was going to confront her again, but this time I was prepared. I knew I had to protect myself and my assets. I started thinking about lawyers, about how she might try to manipulate the situation, especially since she's always been manipulative and bitchy when she didn't get her way. I had to be smart. But first, I needed to see her face to face and hear her lie to me again. So I set a date to talk with her that evening. I wanted to see her reaction in person, to gauge whether she truly felt remorse or if she was just trying to keep the facade up. When she came home, she was nervous, fidgety. I could see the guilt written all over her face. I didn't say much at first. I just looked at her, waiting for her to crack. When she finally did, she spun some bullshit about how she wasn't happy, that she felt trapped, and that Mark was just someone who made her feel alive again. She said she never meant to hurt me, but her words sounded hollow, rehearsed. I could tell she was trying to lie her way out of it, but I wasn't buying it. That night, I felt a mixture of heartbreak and rage. I was hurt that she'd betrayed me, but furious that she'd lied so blatantly. I started to realize that this wasn't just about cheating. It was about how she'd manipulated me from the start. She married me for my inheritance 200, I inherited from my grandmother, and then she convinced my sister to forge my will so she could claim more of the estate. That's how cold and calculating she was. And now, she's claiming half our house and fighting me over $500. I never saw this betrayal coming, and honestly, I still don't know how I'm going to get through it. But I do know one thing. I'm done being played for a fool. I've realized that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fix, and I refuse to let her keep pulling the strings while I get left holding the bag. I've got to protect what's mine, and that means making some tough decisions. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't be a pawn in her game anymore. I'll fight for what's rightfully mine, and I'll do it without her lying and cheating her way through my life. If you've ever been like this, you know how it feels, like your whole world has turned upside down in an instant. That's where I am now. Betrayed, angry, but also starting to see things more clearly. I just hope I can come out of this better than I went in. After that night, everything changed for me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and honestly I felt like I was walking around in a fog. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw, and I kept replaying those messages, that look on Lisa's face when she lied to me again. It was like I'd been hit by a truck. I started obsessively digging into her phone, her emails, her social media, anything that might give me more clues about how deep her deception went. I needed to know if there was more to the story, if there were other guys, other lies I hadn't uncovered yet. And I found it. Turns out, Lisa wasn't just cheating on me with Mark. She'd been seeing someone else, another guy named Jake, who she met at her gym. The texts with him were worse. They talked about meeting up, sneaking around, and even about how she was planning to leave me once she had enough money. I couldn't believe she'd been planning her escape all along, using me for my inheritance and then bailing. The thought made my stomach turn. I felt so stupid for not seeing the signs earlier. All those little things, her secretive phone habits, the late nights, her constant calls, had been part of a bigger plan. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her keep manipulating the situation. I contacted a lawyer, a guy I found through a friend who specialized in divorce and estate cases. I wanted to get everything in order, my assets, the house, the inheritance. I needed to protect what was mine. I also started gathering evidence. Screenshots of the texts, bank statements, everything I could find that proved her deception. I wanted her to know I wasn't going down without a fight. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act of innocence, throwing tantrums and calling me paranoid. She'd lie through her teeth, insisting she was just confused or that Mark and Jake were just friends. But I wasn't buying it. I knew she was lying, and I knew she was trying to spin her web of deception around me. I could see her bitchy side come out more and more. She'd scream at me, accuse me of trust issues, and call me crazy for suspecting her. That only made me more determined. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. This was about justice, about protecting myself and whatever was left of my dignity. One thing that really hit me was how she kept insisting she loved me, but her actions told a different story. She'd say she wanted to fix things, but I could see she was just trying to buy time. I realized her whole game was about control, using her charm, her lies, and her bitchy attitude to keep me confused and on the defensive. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I started to see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who married me for my money and was now trying to squeeze even more out of me. Then there was the issue of the house. I found out she'd been secretly talking to a real estate agent, trying to get the house appraised high so she could claim her cut. I felt like I was in some twisted game show. I knew I had to be strategic. I hired my own appraiser, and I started looking into the legalities of the property. I had to prepare myself for the worst, that she might try to kick me out or claim half of everything, even though I was the one who paid for most of it. She always acted like she was entitled to more, but I wasn't going to let that happen, not without a fight. Throughout all this, I was riding of emotions. The initial shock gave way to anger, white-hot rage at her betrayal. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the clues, how I could have trusted someone so manipulative and bitchy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and honestly, kind of stupid for not seeing through her game sooner. But I also knew deep down I couldn't let her win. I had to stand my ground, fight for what was rightfully mine, and make sure she didn't get away with ruining everything I worked for. It was around this time that I started to realize I was better off without her. The woman I thought I knew was just a master manipulator, and I was tired of being her puppet. I decided I'd file for divorce, but not just that. I wanted to make sure she paid for her lies. I was going to fight for the house, for the inheritance, for everything I deserved. I knew she'd try to drag this out, use her bitchy attitude to make me feel guilty or weak, but I was done playing nice. The process wasn't easy. She fought me every step of the way, calling lawyers, making accusations, trying to turn my friends and family against me. She even threatened to ruin me financially, claiming I was abusive and unstable. I knew she was just throwing everything she could think of to keep her grip on the situation, but I stayed calm, focused, and kept gathering evidence. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I'd seen her true colors now, and I knew I had to be smarter than her if I wanted to come out ahead. Looking back, I realize how much this whole ordeal has changed me. I used to believe in fairness, in honesty, in the idea that marriage was about trust. Now I see how some people, like Lisa, are just out for themselves no matter who they hurt. I've learned the hard way that money can bring out the worst in people, and that betrayal often comes from the people you trust the most. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I'm not going to let her take everything, and I'm not going to let her win. I'll fight for my rights, for my house, and for the little piece of peace I still have left. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs, even if they seem small at first. Once lies and betrayal start piling up, it's almost impossible to fix what's broken. Protect yourself, stay calm, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Because if you don't, some people will take everything you have, your money, your house, your dignity, and leave you with nothing but heartbreak. After I started to get my acts together and gather evidence, I realized just how deep Lisa's lies went. She wasn't just cheating, she'd been planning her escape for months. The more I dug, the more I found. It was like peeling back layers of a toxic onion. She convinced my sister to forge documents, faking my signature on a new will that left her a huge chunk of my inheritance. That's when I knew I had to act fast, not just to protect my money, but to stop her from completely screwing me over. I hired a private investigator. I needed to know exactly how far she was willing to go. Turns out, she'd been meeting Mark and Jake at different hotels, sometimes multiple times a week. The texts were explicit, talks about getting away, starting fresh, and making sure I never find out. She'd even discussed how she'd lie about her whereabouts if I asked. It was like she'd turned into a different person, cold and calculating. I felt like I'd been living with a stranger all along, and that realization made my stomach churn. Meanwhile, I started to prepare for the legal fight. I spoke with my lawyer about filing for divorce and halting any transfer of assets she might try. I also had to secure the house, which she was already trying to sell behind my back. I found out she contacted a real estate agent, trying to get a high appraisal so she could claim her cut. That was the moment I realized I had to be one step ahead. I ordered my own appraisal, documented every conversation, and started building my case for full ownership of the house and the inheritance. I also started thinking about how to handle her bitchy attitude. Lisa always played the victim, crying about how she was just trying to find herself or needed excitement. She'd scream at me, call me controlling, and accuse me of being paranoid. But I saw through her act. She was just trying to manipulate the situation to turn me into the bad guy. I stayed calm, though. I knew that if I lost my temper, I'd give her even more ammunition. Instead, I kept my cool and focused on the facts. One night, I decided to confront her again. I told her I knew about Mark and Jake, about the forged will, and about her plans to take everything. Her face twisted into a mixture of rage and panic. She tried to deny everything at first, then started spinning some bullshit about how she deserved a better life, that I was controlling, and that she needed to be free. That was classic Lisa, blame shifting, twisting the truth, trying to make me look like the bad guy, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen her true colors and I was done being her pawn. I told her I'd be taking legal action and that she should prepare for a fight. She scoffed, called me paranoid and crazy, and stormed out of the house. That was the moment I knew I had to stay strong. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not after everything I'd worked for. I started making plans to move out, to get a restraining order if necessary, and to get full control of the house and my inheritance. I was furious, angry at her lies, her manipulations, and the fact that she'd tried to cheat me out of everything. In the days that followed, I kept pushing forward. I met with my lawyer, who told me I had a solid case. The forged documents, the texts, and her attempts to sell the house all worked in my favor. I also hired a financial expert to verify the true value of our assets, just in case she tried to undervalue or hide anything. I knew Lisa was a bitchy, manipulative woman, but I was determined not to let her get away with it. I had to be smarter, more strategic, and prepared for whatever she threw at me next. It's crazy how fast everything can change. One moment I was happily married, thinking I had a future with Lisa. The next, I was fighting for my life savings, my house, and my dignity. Honestly, I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, so much anger that I could barely sleep some nights. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I saw her for what she truly was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd used me for her own gain. And I knew I couldn't let her win. Not this time. I started to realize that I'd been living in denial, ignoring the red flags, pretending everything was fine. But now I saw clearly. I wasn't just fighting for money or property. I was fighting for my sanity, my future, and my self-respect. I had to do whatever it took to protect myself from her bitchy, lying ways. I made a vow that I wouldn't let her manipulate me anymore, that I'd stand my ground and fight for what's rightfully mine. The legal battle was about to get ugly. I could feel it. She was already trying to turn friends and family against me, spreading rumors about how I was abusive or controlling. But I knew the truth. I knew I'd done everything right, documented everything, hired the right people, and stayed focused. I wasn't perfect, but I was determined. And I'd be damned if I let her take everything I worked so hard for. This was just the beginning of what I knew would be a long, messy fight, but I was prepared to see it through. And honestly, I'm still not sure how I'm going to come out of this, but I do know one thing. I won't let her steal my life, my money, or my dignity without a fight. Because at the end of the day, I learned that some people, like Lisa, are just plain manipulative, and if you don't stand up for yourself, they'll walk all over you. That's what I'm doing now, standing tall, fighting back, and making sure she pays for every lie and every betrayal she threw my way. By now, I had everything lined up. My lawyer was working on filing the divorce papers, and I had full documentation of her lies, her attempts to manipulate the estate, and her secret meetings with Mark and Jake. It was like building a fortress around what was mine, and I wasn't about to let her tear it down. But I knew Lisa wasn't going to go quietly. She's always been bitchy and manipulative, and I could see she was already planning her next move to try and turn the tables. One day I caught her trying to sneak out with some of her clothes, acting like she was just going to visit a friend. I confronted her right then and there. She snapped at me, saying I was controlling and paranoid, and that I was trying to ruin her life. That's her favorite line, playing the victim. She spun it like I was the crazy one, like she was just some innocent woman trying to find herself. But I knew better. I'd seen her true colors, and I wasn't falling for her manipulative bullshit anymore. I told her she wasn't going anywhere until we sorted things out legally. I kept my voice steady, but inside I was boiling. I knew she was trying to run from her problems, maybe even trying to hide more evidence or set up some kind of trap. I kept her in the house, locked down, and told her she'd have to face the consequences. She threw a bitchy fit, screaming about how I was abusive and controlling, but I just stayed calm. I knew that if I lost my temper, she'd use it against me. Meanwhile, I started talking with my lawyer about the possibility of getting a restraining order. I didn't trust her not to do something crazy, and I wasn't about to let her run off with my assets. I also started to prepare for the worst. If she tried to claim the house or the inheritance illegally, I wanted to be ready. I hired a financial investigator to verify all our assets and a forensic accountant to check her bank accounts and emails. I needed irrefutable proof that she'd been planning this for a while. It was around this time I learned she'd been secretly contacting a lawyer of her own, trying to find a way to claim half of everything, even though she didn't contribute much financially. That bitchy attitude of hers was coming out even more. She kept insisting she deserved a big chunk of the house, that she helped build it, even though I paid for most of it and inherited most of the money. I was furious. I knew her game, trying to turn the situation around, make herself look like the victim and drag me through court. One night, I sat her down and told her I had enough. I laid out all the evidence I'd collected: screenshots, bank statements, emails. Her face twisted into a sneer as I showed her everything. She kept lying, trying to spin her web of bullshit. She said she never meant for it to be like this, that she still loved me, but I saw through her act. I knew she was just trying to manipulate me to keep her grip on the money and the house. I told her she could scream, cry, or lie all she wanted, but the truth was out now. I was filing for full custody of the house, and I was going to fight her over the inheritance. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to let her steal what was mine. My patience had run out. I'd been blind for too long, and I was done with her bitchy, lying ways. I was going to stand my ground, no matter how much she tried to guilt-trip me or throw her tantrums. The next step was the court hearing. I knew she'd pull out all her tricks, probably try to paint me as the villain, accuse me of being controlling, or say I was abusive. But I had enough evidence to counter every lie. I hired a good attorney who knew how to handle manipulative women like her. I also prepared myself emotionally. I knew this fight was going to get ugly, and I had to stay strong. I had to remind myself why I was doing this: to protect what was mine, to stop her from taking everything I'd worked for, and to finally put an end to her bitchy manipulations. It was strange, looking back, how quickly everything changed. One moment I was happily married, and the next I was in a legal war to keep my assets. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I saw her for what she really was: a selfish, manipulative woman who'd marry for money and lie her way through life. I realized I'd been naive to trust her, but now I was determined to fight for my dignity, my house, and my future. The court date was set, and I knew she was going to try her hardest to manipulate the judge and jury. I had to be ready for her bitchy attitude, her lies, and her tears, but I was prepared. I'd come too far to let her walk all over me now. I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself and making sure she paid for the lies she'd told. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not a chance. All I could do now was wait and prepare for the storm ahead. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I also knew I had no choice but to see it through. Because at the end of the day, I learned that some people, like Lisa, are just masters of manipulation, and if you don't fight back, they'll take everything you have. I was finally ready to fight for what's mine, and I wasn't going to back down. The court date finally arrived, and I felt like I was about to step into the ring with an opponent I knew all too well: Lisa, with her bitchy smirk and manipulative attitude. I had prepared myself mentally for every possible move she might make, but honestly, I still underestimated how far she was willing to go. She showed up dressed to impress, acting innocent and fragile, like she was the victim, as if she hadn't been. Caught red-handed trying to cheat me out of everything. The courtroom was tense. My lawyer laid out all the evidence, proof of her affair with Mark and Jake, the forged will, her attempts to sell the house behind my back, and her manipulative texts. Lisa's lawyer tried to spin her as the wronged wife, claiming she was just confused and desperate for love. But I saw right through it. I knew her game. She was good at pretending to be innocent, but her bitchy attitude gave her away. She kept interrupting, trying to throw tantrums, and even crying fake tears at one point, trying to sway the judge. I stayed calm, even when she looked directly at me with that venomous glare, trying to guilt-trip me into backing down. But I was done playing nice. I told the court everything about the lies, the affair, the forged documents, and her attempts to steal my inheritance. I explained how she'd manipulated my sister into forging my signature, how she'd been secretly talking to lawyers behind my back, and how she'd been planning to leave me with nothing. I laid it all out with clarity and conviction. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to half the house because she helped build it, and that I was controlling for not letting her leave. But I presented the evidence I'd collected: bank statements, texts, emails, that proved she'd been planning her escape long before I found out. I also brought witnesses, my sister, who confirmed her role in the forged will, and the appraiser who valued the house at its true worth. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions, and I saw her bitchy attitude falter under the weight of the facts. Finally, the judge made her ruling. She awarded me full custody of the house, declared the forged will null and void, and ordered Lisa to pay back the money she'd tried to steal through her manipulations. The court also awarded me the inheritance, and I was granted a restraining order to keep her away from my property and finances. I felt an overwhelming rush of relief. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had fought for everything I deserved, and I'd won. But the aftermath wasn't just about the legal victory. Lisa's attitude didn't change overnight. She was furious, bitchy, screaming and throwing tantrums outside the courthouse. She called me heartless, crazy, and worse, but I didn't care. I knew the truth, and I knew I'd done everything by the book. The judge's ruling was clear, and I finally had some peace of mind. I felt like I could start rebuilding my life without her bitchy manipulations hanging over me. In the days that followed, I started the process of moving on. I hired contractors to fix up the house, cleaned out her belongings, and made plans to sell off some of her remaining assets. I also cut ties with her family. She'd been using her mother and sister to try and turn the court against me, but I saw through that too. I realized how much energy I'd wasted on her manipulations, and I promised myself I'd never let someone like her control me again. Looking back, I see how much I've grown. I was naive, trusting, and too forgiving at first, but her manipulations taught me a harsh lesson. Some people will lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what they want. And if you don't stand your ground, they'll keep taking from you. I've learned that fighting for yourself isn't just about money or property, it's about dignity and self-respect. I refuse to be a victim of her bitchy, lying ways anymore. Now I'm finally moving forward. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I'm focusing on building a new life, one where I trust myself and my instincts. I've also become more cautious about who I let into my life. Lisa's betrayal was a wake-up call that some people are just selfish and manipulative, and the only way to protect yourself is to stay vigilant. To anyone out there dealing with a similar situation, trust your gut, document everything, and don't let anyone manipulate or gaslight you. Fight for what's yours. It's not easy, and the process can be brutal, but in the end, standing your ground is the most powerful thing you can do. I learned that the hard way, and honestly, I feel stronger now than I ever did before all this started. The betrayal hurt like hell, but it also made me realize my worth. And that's something no bitchy manipulator can take away from me. In the aftermath of everything, I've had a lot of time to reflect on what I went through. Honestly, I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where I'd have to fight so hard just to keep what's mine: my house, my inheritance, my sanity. Lisa's betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. She was manipulative, bitchy, and utterly ruthless when it came to getting what she wanted. But I also realized something else. I was stronger than I thought. I had the backbone to stand up, to fight back against her lies, and to protect myself from her toxic schemes. The process drained me emotionally, no doubt. There were nights I'd lie awake, replaying every moment, every lie she told, every manipulation she tried to pull. But those sleepless nights also became a turning point. I learned to trust my instincts more. I learned that sometimes you have to be your own hero, especially when someone you thought loved you turns out to be just out for themselves. Getting through the legal battle changed my perspective on trust and relationships. I used to believe in honesty and loyalty. I really did. But now I see that some people are just selfish and manipulative, willing to lie and cheat to get ahead. The key is recognizing those red flags early and not ignoring them. That's what I wish I had done from the start. I let her manipulate my trust, and it almost cost me everything. But I also learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to fight for what's right. Since the court ruling, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life. I've started therapy, not just to heal from the emotional scars, but to learn how to trust again. I've also become more cautious about who I let into my circle. The betrayal taught me that kindness and trust are precious, but they have to be earned. I'm more guarded now, but also more aware. I refuse to let anyone manipulate me the way Lisa did. The house is now mine, and it feels like a fresh start. I've put in new security measures, fixed the places she tried to sabotage, and I'm slowly making it my own again. I've also begun to reconnect with friends and family who supported me through this. Their support reminded me that I wasn't alone, and that I deserved better than the lies and manipulations I'd endured. What's the most important lesson I've learned? Never underestimate how far someone will go when they're determined to get what they want. Lisa played her cards well, but her lies eventually unraveled. The truth always has a way of coming out, no matter how much someone tries to hide it. And when it does, you have to be ready to fight for yourself, your peace, and your future. I don't regret standing up for myself. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's also been the most empowering. I finally see that I am capable of protecting what matters most, myself and my hard-earned life. Lisa's betrayal was a wake-up call, but it also became a catalyst for change. I learned to value my own worth, to trust my instincts, and to never let anyone manipulate me again. So to anyone out there dealing with a similar betrayal, know this. You are not alone, and you don't have to accept being a victim. Fight for your rights, protect your assets, and never let someone's lies define your story. It's tough, yes. It will test your limits. But in the end, standing your ground is the most powerful thing you can do. And trust me, you'll come out stronger, because sometimes the only way to truly win is to refuse to be played anymore.